A rich American tourist spat on a royal guard's face. He expected rage. He expected retaliation. What he got instead was something far more unsettling. What exactly was it? Before we reveal that, hit the subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. The morning mist still clung to the ancient stones of St. James's Palace as Lance Sergeant Nathan Harrow adjusted his scarlet tunic one final time. At 34, he carried himself with the quiet gravity of a man who had earned his place through more than just ceremony. The mirror-polished boots on his feet had walked through far more than palace courtyards. They'd carried him through 3 tours in Iraq, where his reconnaissance unit had provided crucial intelligence that saved countless lives. Behind the ceremonial bearing stood a soldier whose file read like something from a commendation manual. Nathan had earned his stripes the hard way, leading extraction missions in Basra when most of his current colleagues were still in secondary school. The same steady hands that now gripped a ceremonial rifle had once steadied a sniper scope during the siege of Fallujah, where his precision had broken an insurgent position threatening an entire battalion. His unit commander had written in his service record, "Harrow possesses the rare combination of tactical brilliance and unshakable composure under extreme pressure. In 30 years of service, I have rarely encountered a soldier with such absolute mastery of both action and restraint." That restraint had saved lives in the field, where a single moment of lost control could mean the difference between a successful extraction and a catastrophic firefight. But none of that showed in his face as he took his position outside the palace gates. To the gathering tourists, Nathan was simply another red-coated figure in an elaborate costume, standing motionless for their entertainment and photographs. The morning crowd was already building, families with excited children, tour groups clutching guidebooks, and the inevitable stream of visitors hoping to catch the famous guards in an unguarded moment. Nathan had been at his post for barely 30 minutes when the sleek black Bentley pulled up to the curb, its chrome gleaming like a weapon in the London sun. Charles Winslow III stepped out with all the subtlety of a peacock in a library. Everything about him screamed wealth and entitlement, from his designer sunglasses that cost more than most people's monthly rent to the gold watch that caught the light with every gesture. Behind him emerged his usual entourage, a nervous assistant clutching an expensive camera rig and a young woman already filming everything with her phone. Charles had made his fortune in Boston real estate, built on his father's shipping empire and his grandfather's steel mills. At 42, he'd never heard the word no applied to anything he wanted, and that included respect. His Instagram account, followed by millions, was filled with videos of him testing traditional institutions around the world, always with the same mocking tone, always with the same assumption that money could buy him passage through any boundary. The comments on his previous videos told the story of a man addicted to dominance, broke a Swiss guard at the Vatican, and made a beefeater laugh at the Tower. Each claimed victory fed his need for control, his deep-seated belief that every person, tradition and institution was just another commodity waiting to be purchased. "Would you look at this setup?" Charles announced loudly, gesturing toward Nathan as if he were examining a museum display. "They've actually got grown men playing dress-up for the tourists. This is even better than the Vatican Guards." His assistant, Marcus, shifted uncomfortably behind the camera. He'd seen this routine before in a dozen different countries, and it never ended well. "Maybe we should keep moving, Mr. Winslow. The tour schedule." "Relax, Marcus," Charles cut him off with a wave. "This is exactly the kind of authentic local colour my followers want to see." He positioned himself directly in Nathan's line of sight, that practiced camera smile spreading across his face. Besides, what's he going to do? Stand there and take it? That's literally his job. Nathan remained perfectly still, his eyes fixed on that distant point every royal guard learned to focus on, a mental anchor that kept them steady through hours of provocations, both innocent and malicious. His breathing remained controlled, measured, the same rhythm he'd used during 16-hour surveillance missions in hostile territory. But Charles interpreted the stillness as weakness. "Unbelievable!" he laughed, circling Nathan like a predator sizing up prey. "It's like a wax museum exhibit, except this one's getting paid to pretend he's important." He snapped his fingers inches from Nathan's face, the sharp sound echoing off the palace walls. "Hello? Anyone home in there?" A small crowd was beginning to gather, drawn by Charles's loud commentary and theatrical gestures. Most tourists maintained the respectful distance that centuries of tradition demanded, but Charles had positioned himself close enough that his breath fogged Nathan's rifle barrel when he spoke. "Marcus, are you getting this?" Charles called over his shoulder. "This is what passes for military discipline in Britain. Stand perfectly still and hope nobody notices you're completely useless." An elderly gentleman in a Royal Navy veteran's blazer frowned and moved closer. "Sir, there are protocols about approaching the guards. Perhaps you might—" "Protocols?" Charles turned with that same predatory smile. "I'm American. We wrote the book on not caring about other people's protocols." He gestured dismissively toward Nathan. "This toy soldier isn't protecting anything real. He's a tourist attraction in a fancy costume." The veteran's face hardened. "That toy soldier has done 3 combat tours in Iraq. Perhaps you might show some respect." Charles laughed, a sound that made several nearby children instinctively step closer to their parents. "Combat tours? Please, if he'd seen real action, he wouldn't be standing here playing statue for photo ops. Real soldiers get real jobs." Nathan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his stance never wavered. In his mind, he recited the names of the 7 men from his unit who hadn't made it home from their last deployment, a mental exercise his therapist had taught him for maintaining control in stressful situations. Each name was a reminder of why discipline mattered, why duty meant something larger than personal pride, but Charles was just getting started. He pulled out his phone and began live streaming, his voice taking on the exaggerated enthusiasm of a social media personality. "Okay, followers, we're here at one of London's famous palace guards, and I've got to test a theory. They say these guys won't react to anything, but everyone has a breaking point, right?" The numbers on his live stream climbed rapidly. Comments began flooding in, most encouraging him to push further. Charles fed off the attention like fuel on a fire. "Let's see what happens when we get a little closer to Mr. Tin Soldier here," he announced, stepping within arm's reach of Nathan. The violation of personal space was deliberate, calculated to provoke a reaction. "According to my research, they can't move, can't speak, can't do anything except stand there and take whatever comes their way." He began waving his hands in Nathan's peripheral vision, testing the edges of his self-control. "Come on, soldier boy. Even a statue would be more responsive than this. Are you even breathing?" Marcus lowered his camera, his discomfort obvious. "Mr. Winslow, perhaps we should—" "Should what?" Charles snapped, his mask of entertainment slipping for a moment to reveal something uglier beneath. "I'm conducting a cultural experiment here, testing the limits of British politeness." He turned back to Nathan, his voice dropping to a more menacing tone. "Besides, what's he going to do? File a complaint? His entire job is to stand there and be ignored." The crowd had grown larger now, forming a loose circle around the confrontation. Children peered between adult legs, sensing tension they couldn't quite understand. Several tourists had stopped taking pictures, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. "You know what I think?" Charles announced, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "I think this whole Royal Guard thing is just an elaborate bluff, a bunch of actors in costumes pretending to be something they're not." He leaned closer to Nathan, close enough that his expensive cologne mixed unpleasantly with the morning air. "Prove me wrong, soldier. Show me you're more than just a mannequin in a museum." Nathan's breathing remained steady, controlled, but those with military experience might have noticed the slight whitening of his knuckles around his rifle. Years of combat experience had taught him to recognize genuine threats, And while Charles posed no physical danger, his escalating behaviour carried the familiar pattern of someone testing boundaries until they found the breaking point. "Nothing?" Charles continued, his frustration bleeding through his practised showmanship. "Not even a blink? Come on. Surely the Queen's finest has something to say about being disrespected by a colonial." He began making increasingly erratic gestures, waving his hands close to Nathan's face, clapping sharply near his ears, even pretending to trip and stumble into his personal space. Each provocation was carefully calculated for maximum humiliation, while staying just within the boundaries of what might be dismissed as harmless fun. A woman in the crowd whispered urgently to her husband, "Someone should stop this. He's harassing that poor man." Her husband nodded grimly. "The guard can't defend himself. That's what makes this so cowardly." But Charles caught the comment and spun toward them with theatrical indignation. "Cowardly? I'm the one taking risks here. This guy's got a rifle, and I'm standing right in front of him. If he wanted to do something about it, he could." He turned back to Nathan with renewed aggression. "But he won't, because deep down, he knows I'm right. This is all theatre." The live-stream comments were becoming increasingly vicious. Anonymous voices encouraging Charles to push further, to break the guard, to prove that respect could be purchased or stolen, just like everything else. The virtual mob fed his real-world behaviour, each supportive comment validating his assumptions about power and privilege. "Tell you what," Charles announced, positioning himself directly in front of Nathan again. "I'll give you one chance to prove you're more than decoration. Look me in the eye, just once. Show me there's actually a person under that ridiculous hat." Nathan's eyes remained fixed forward, his gaze passing through Charles as if he were transparent. The discipline that had kept him motionless during 12-hour desert watches now held him steady against a different kind of assault, one aimed not at his body, but at his dignity. Charles's smile was becoming forced now, edged with genuine anger at being so completely ignored. "Fine, have it your way." He dug into his pocket and pulled out a thick roll of bills, waving them in front of Nathan's face. "Maybe this will get your attention. Is that what this is about? You want compensation for breaking character?" The money, clearly hundreds of pounds, fluttered in the breeze inches from Nathan's nose. Several tourists gasped at the blatant attempt at bribery. The elderly naval veteran started forward, his weathered face dark with anger. "That's enough," the old sailor said firmly. "You're not just insulting him now, you're insulting everything he represents." Charles spun around, his facade of good humour completely abandoned. "And what exactly does he represent? Blind obedience? Mindless tradition? The inability to think for himself?" He thrust the money toward Nathan again. "This is what your precious tradition gets you. A man so broken down that he can't even defend his own dignity." "He's defending something larger than dignity," the veteran replied quietly. "Something you clearly don't understand." The words hit their mark. Charles's face flushed red, and for a moment the mask slipped completely. This wasn't about testing traditions or creating content. This was about a man who had never been denied anything, finally meeting something that wouldn't bend to his will. "Larger than dignity?" Charles's voice rose to a near shout. "This is pathetic. He's a grown man playing dress-up, too scared or too stupid to stand up for himself." He moved within inches of Nathan's face, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper that carried to every corner of the silent courtyard. "Let me explain something to you, soldier boy. In the real world, men like me eat men like you for breakfast. We build empires while you stand around playing with toy soldiers. You're nothing but a tourist attraction, and not even a good one." The crowd had fallen completely silent now. Even the children had stopped fidgeting, sensing that something terrible was about to happen. The only sounds were the distant rumble of London traffic and Charles's increasingly ragged breathing as his control finally shattered. "You want to know what I think of your precious tradition?" he hissed, his face contorted with rage at being so completely dismissed. "This is what I think. And then he did the unthinkable. He spat. The thick glob of saliva struck Nathan just beneath his left eye, running in a slow, disgusting streak down his cheek before catching on the black chin strap of his bearskin cap. The white plume of the ceremonial headpiece caught a droplet that glistened obscenely in the morning sunlight. The collective gasp from the crowd was sharp, immediate, visceral. Someone screamed. A woman began to cry. Children were quickly turned away from the horrific scene. An American tourist dropped his camera, the device clattering against the stone as his hands flew to cover his mouth in shock. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Did he really just—" But the words died in his throat as the full horror of what had happened settled over the courtyard like a heavy blanket. But Nathan didn't move, not a flinch, not a blink, not even a tremor in his grip on the rifle. He stood there, the spit slowly drying on his face, his eyes still fixed on that distant point beyond the crowd, beyond the humiliation, beyond the man who had just committed one of the most degrading acts imaginable against a serving soldier. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Charles seemed momentarily stunned by what he'd done, the reality of his action cutting through his rage like a cold slap. The livestream comments exploded with shock and outrage, but for once he wasn't reading them. An elderly woman near the back of the crowd whispered, "That's not a man, that's an animal." A teenager pulled out his phone and began recording, but not for entertainment. His face showed the grim determination of someone documenting evidence. "The world needs to see this," he muttered. Charles looked around the circle of faces surrounding him and saw something that made his confident smile falter completely. There was no amusement now, no curiosity, no friendly tourist atmosphere. There was only disgust. And still Nathan stood motionless, the very picture of controlled discipline, even with another man's spit slowly drying on his uniform. The sound of approaching boots echoed across the stone courtyard as P.C. Langley, a mounted police officer who had been patrolling the area, dismounted quickly and strode toward the commotion. His expression was grim, professional, but anyone with experience reading police officers would have recognized the barely controlled anger beneath his calm exterior. "Sir," Langley said as he approached Charles, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made everyone in earshot straighten unconsciously. "You need to step away from the guard immediately." Charles, still riding the adrenaline of his assault, spun toward the officer with his old arrogance, struggling to reassert itself. "About time someone official showed up. I was just having a bit of fun with your toy soldier here, no harm done." Langley's eyes flicked to Nathan's face, taking in the slowly drying spit with professional detachment before fixing on Charles with laser intensity. "No harm done," he repeated quietly. "Sir, you've just committed assault on a serving member of Her Majesty's Armed Forces. That's a serious criminal offence." "Assault?" Charles laughed, but it sounded hollow now, desperate. "It was just spit. He's a soldier. He's trained for worse than that. He's trained to defend his country, not to endure your disrespect," Langley replied, stepping closer until he was between Charles and Nathan. "And regardless of his training, what you just did constitutes assault under British law." The crowd was pressing closer now, but not to watch a spectacle, to bear witness. Phones were recording from multiple angles, capturing not just Charles's degrading behaviour, but Nathan's incredible restraint in the face of it. The footage would spread across social media within minutes, but unlike Charles's usual viral content, this wouldn't be celebrated. "You're making a big deal out of nothing," Charles protested, but his voice was losing confidence with each word. The hostile faces surrounding him no longer looked like an audience. They looked like a jury. "I'm American, I have diplomatic immunity." "You're a tourist," Langley corrected flatly. "And diplomatic immunity doesn't cover criminal assault. You're under arrest." As the police officer reached for his handcuffs, something extraordinary began to happen in the crowd. The elderly naval veteran stepped forward, stopped directly in front of Nathan, and snapped to attention. His right hand rose in a perfect military salute, sharp, precise, respectful. Within seconds, another man joined him. Then a woman, then another. One by one, without words or coordination, tourists from around the world began to line up in front of the motionless guard. Young and old, British and foreign, military veterans and civilian families, all standing at attention, all saluting the man who had endured the unendurable without breaking. A German businessman in an expensive suit stood beside a teenage backpacker from Australia. A Japanese tourist with tears in her eyes positioned herself next to an elderly French couple who had stopped their morning walk to witness history. The barriers of language, nationality and social class dissolved in that moment, replaced by something far more fundamental: the universal recognition of true honour under fire. A small girl, no more than 7 years old, tugged on her mother's dress. "Mummy, why is everyone standing like that?" Her mother, tears streaming down her face, knelt beside her daughter. "Because that soldier just showed us what real strength looks like, sweetheart. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not fight back." The child nodded solemnly and tried to copy the adult's salutes. Her tiny hand pressed awkwardly against her forehead, in imitation of something she didn't fully understand, but instinctively respected. Charles looked around the transformed courtyard with growing horror. His moment of triumph had become a scene of reverence for the man he'd tried to humiliate. The crowd that had once watched his performance with curiosity now stood in silent tribute to Nathan's discipline. "This is insane," he muttered as Langley secured the handcuffs. "He's just a guard, just a man in a costume." "No," said the naval veteran, still holding his salute. "He's a soldier who just reminded us all what honour looks like." As Charles was led away, still protesting his innocence and threatening lawsuits, the crowd maintained their silent vigil. They stood there for nearly 10 minutes, honouring not just Nathan, but everything he represented: duty, sacrifice, and the strength to endure without compromising one's principles. Nathan never acknowledged the salutes. His training and duty demanded that he remain focused forward, unmoved by both derision and admiration alike. But something in his bearing seemed to straighten slightly, a subtle shift that suggested he felt the support surrounding him. When the changing of the guard finally arrived, the ceremony proceeded with its usual precision and pageantry. But this time, the tourists watched with a different understanding. They weren't observing a quaint tradition or a tourist attraction. They were witnessing the continuation of something profound and worthy of respect. As Nathan marched away from his post, his replacement taking position with identical discipline, the crowd began to disperse. But the conversations that followed were different from the usual tourist chatter. People spoke in hushed, respectful tones about what they had witnessed. Not the humiliation of a guard, but the revelation of what true strength actually looked like. In the days that followed, the footage spread across the internet with viral speed. But unlike most viral videos, this one sparked serious conversations about respect, tradition, and the meaning of true strength. Charles Winslow III found himself facing not just criminal charges, but global condemnation for his actions. Nathan Harrow returned to his duties the next day, his uniform immaculate, his bearing unchanged. If the incident had affected him, no outward sign remained. But among his fellow guards, among the palace staff, and among the tourists who visited in the days that followed, something had changed. The royal guards were no longer seen as living statues or tourist attractions. They were recognised for what they had always been: professional soldiers whose ceremonial duties demanded the same discipline and sacrifice as any combat deployment. And in a world that often confused noise with strength and aggression with courage, Nathan's silent endurance had reminded everyone who witnessed it that the greatest victories are sometimes won by those who never throw a punch. Have you ever wondered what you would do if someone tried to humiliate you in front of strangers? Could you show the same restraint Nathan displayed, or would your pride demand immediate response? What does this story tell us about the difference between real strength and the appearance of power? Is the ability to endure without reacting actually more impressive than fighting back? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and love hearing your perspectives on these powerful moments. If this story moved you, please hit that like button to help us share these important lessons about respect and dignity. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss our daily stories about the remarkable men and women who serve as royal guards. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that true strength isn't about dominating others. It's about maintaining your principles when everything around you tells you to abandon them. Our next story is already waiting for you on screen. Click it now, and we'll see you tomorrow with another powerful reminder of what honor really means.